Imagine walking through the dusty corridors of history, where countless stories were lost, buried beneath the weight of time. One such story is that of Rania, a woman whose life, and the life she carried, vanished into the shadows. Her name whispered only in forgotten records, her struggles unseen, her fate unknown. Tonight, we peel back the layers of time to uncover the hidden story of a pregnant woman lost in history's shadows. Rania lived during a time when women's lives were often invisible to history, their struggles and triumphs erased or ignored. The era she was born into was marked by rigid social hierarchies, political unrest, and strict expectations of women's behavior. Her story begins in a modest village, far from the grand palaces and official records that chronicled the lives of kings, generals, and scholars. Yet, despite the obscurity of her surroundings, the events of her life would intersect with broader historical forces, leaving traces that historians have struggled to piece together. Pregnancy in Rania's world was both a blessing and a burden. While the expectation to bear children was immense, access to care and support was minimal, and many women suffered in silence. Scholars have noted that records of maternal mortality and pregnancy-related hardships were often either generalized or completely absent, making Rania's experience difficult to trace. But in her fleeting appearances in local accounts and family letters, we glimpsed the contours of a life that was deeply human, filled with fear, hope, and the quiet courage of survival. Historians specializing in gender studies have pointed out that women like Rania were often remembered only through the lens of those in power, either as property, symbols, or sources of scandal. Modern researchers have begun to challenge these narratives, using fragmented documents, oral histories, and material evidence to reconstruct the realities of women whose lives were otherwise erased. Rania's village, tucked away between hills and rivers, was not untouched by the political upheavals of her time. Banditry, shifting allegiances, and outbreaks of disease created a backdrop of uncertainty. Her pregnancy, a deeply personal journey, unfolded amidst these larger societal pressures, amplifying the risks and the stakes. And yet, even in the absence of detailed records, the echoes of her choices, her resilience, and the moments of quiet defiance she displayed against societal constraints reach us today. They remind us that history is not only shaped by those whose names are celebrated but also by those who navigated life's trials quietly, leaving subtle imprints that, when carefully examined, reveal profound truths. Tonight, as we trace Rania's path, we are not just uncovering a story of loss and struggle. We are witnessing the resilience of a woman whose courage survived the shadows of time, waiting for someone to listen. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy dark history stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your feedback in the comments. Rania's story begins in the early morning mist of her small village, where the first light revealed the fragile rooftops and the winding paths she knew so intimately. She had already felt the weight of her pregnancy pressing against her body, a constant reminder of the life she carried, and yet she moved with a quiet determination, carrying water from the river, tending the small patch of garden that fed her family, and weaving the threads of her daily life with care and precision. Her neighbors noticed the way she paused often, clutching her belly as if to steady herself, and some whispered about her condition with a mixture of concern and judgment, though none dared to offer real help, for society had its rules and women were expected to endure silently. The local midwife had warned her about the dangers of childbirth, recounting stories of women who had not survived, leaving behind grieving families and empty homes. And though Rania listened, she could feel a distant hope growing in her chest, fragile but persistent. History rarely captures the intimate fears of women like her, but when we examine the few surviving letters and records from that period, a pattern emerges, fear intertwined with a stubborn hope, a sense that life must go on even when the odds seem impossible. As she walked through the village square that morning, she passed children playing near the wells, their laughter ringing out, a stark contrast to the heaviness in her own heart. Her husband, a man whose presence was steady but unremarkable, watched her from the doorway of their modest home, worry etched on his face, though he did not voice it, for words were often seen as unnecessary distractions from the labor of daily survival. Outside, the villagers were beginning to prepare for the harvest, the sound of carts creaking and hooves striking dirt roads filling the air, and Rania could not help but feel a pang of isolation. The world moved on around her, yet her own journey was uniquely perilous. Experts in gender history have noted that women in Rania's circumstances were often subject to both physical and social pressures, the intersection of which created an environment of relentless anxiety. And she was no exception. She spent her days pacing slowly through her home, making sure her household was in order, checking on the small livestock, and occasionally writing letters to her distant relatives, though she knew few would survive the passage through time to tell her story. Each step she took was cautious, each movement calculated, for she had already experienced a minor complication weeks earlier that left her shaken but determined to continue. As the seasons shifted, the village itself seemed to reflect her own inner turmoil, the summer sun scorching the earth and then retreating, leaving behind cold nights that made her shiver, even indoors. Conversations with modern historians draw chilling parallels between women like Rania and contemporary accounts of maternal hardship in isolated communities, highlighting a universal struggle across centuries. She remembered the night when a distant relative had visited, offering advice wrapped in veiled warnings, telling her to avoid certain foods and certain paths, speaking in hushed tones as if the air itself could betray secrets. Rania followed these instructions carefully, though her instincts sometimes aged her otherwise, a silent battle between wisdom and intuition unfolding each day. And then came the illness that spread through the village, a fever that claimed young and old indiscriminately, sparing no one and striking fear into every household. Rania watched neighbors fall ill, some recovering, some not, and she felt her own pulse quicken, aware that her condition made her even more vulnerable. Midwives tried their best to assist, yet their resources were limited, and the remedies, though sincere, were often ineffective. The tension in the air grew palpable, whispers of impending death floated through the alleys, and the villagers became wary of one another, suspicion creeping into interactions once marked by routine familiarity. In the midst of this, Rania discovered a small notebook left behind by her mother, filled with remedies, prayers, and observations about pregnancy and childbirth, a relic that connected her to a lineage of women who had endured similar struggles, each entry a reminder of survival in the face of adversity. She read it repeatedly, memorizing instructions for herbal treatments, bathing routines, and breathing techniques, and while she understood the risks, she also found a measure of comfort in these words, feeling as though her mother's presence guided her steps. But fate has a way of testing even the strongest resolve. One evening, as dusk fell and the village prepared for rest, Rania felt a sudden, sharp pain that caused her to collapse onto the cold floor. Her husband rushed to her side, panic evident, though his fear was tempered by the stoic necessity of action. The midwife was summoned immediately, her arrival bringing a tense calm, as she assessed the situation and murmured instructions in a steady, authoritative voice. Every movement mattered, every decision could mean life or death. Rania, despite the pain, remained conscious, her mind racing with thoughts of the child she carried and the fragile hope that had sustained her thus far. As hours passed, the pain intensified, and she felt a mixture of terror and determination, knowing that this moment would define the rest of her life, or perhaps end it entirely. The midwife worked tirelessly, aided by a few villagers, but the limited tools and knowledge of the time rendered every action precarious. Throughout this ordeal, Rania's thoughts drifted to what had been lost, what might never be recovered, and how her story would fade into the shadows if no one bore witness. Modern commentators often draw attention to these hidden narratives, emphasizing that history's gaps are often filled not with grand events but with the quiet, desperate acts of survival performed by ordinary people. Her labor stretched on through the night, punctuated by moments of excruciating pain and fleeting relief, and the villagers outside whispered prayers into the darkness, their voices mingling with the soft cries of the wind. Even in her suffering, Rania felt a strange clarity, a sense of connection to generations of women who had faced similar trials, each one a silent testament to endurance and courage. As dawn approached, the outcome remained uncertain. Every heartbeat, every breath, was a negotiation with fate. The midwife's hands were steady, her instructions calm, but the reality of limited medical knowledge loomed over them all. Rania's own voice, though weak, expressed prayers and hopes, fragments of thought that oscillated between fear and longing. And then, in a moment of fragile relief, a small life emerged, crying into the world with raw insistence. The villagers exhaled collectively, some weeping openly, some silently bowing their heads in gratitude. Yet, even as joy flickered, the shadow of danger remained, for both mother and child were far from safe. Over the following days, Rania faced fever, exhaustion, and infection, her body struggling to recover while society's expectations pressed relentlessly. The records are unclear, but letters hint at moments when she feared she might not survive, moments when she questioned the fairness of a world that demanded so much yet offered so little. The historian Dr. L. Hartley, an expert on maternal survival in pre-modern communities, notes that women like Rania navigated an invisible battlefield, where knowledge, instinct, and resilience were often the only defenses against overwhelming odds. As weeks turned into months, Rania slowly regained strength, her bond with her child deepening amid the backdrop of a recovering village. Yet, the experience left indelible marks, physical, emotional, and social, that would shape the rest of her life. Each day became a careful negotiation between survival and societal expectation, a balance that required constant vigilance and unwavering determination. And in this, we see a reflection of countless women across time, whose stories linger on the periphery of recorded history, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for someone to bear witness, reminding us that courage is often quiet, uncelebrated, and yet profoundly human. As Rania gradually regained her strength, the rhythm of village life returned, though it carried a new weight of awareness and vigilance. Every morning, she rose with a measured caution, mindful of her body's limits, attending to her child while also resuming small domestic tasks that connected her to the world outside her recovery. The villagers watched her carefully, some with admiration, others with lingering suspicion, for a woman who had faced near death was often both revered and feared, her experience inexplicable to those who had not walked the same precarious path. The child grew, fragile at first, yet each day showed signs of resilience, and Rania poured every ounce of her attention into nurturing this small life. Letters she wrote during this period, preserved by distant relatives, reveal her awareness of the invisible threads that tied personal tragedy to societal pressures, illustrating her contemplations on motherhood, survival, and the invisible networks that sustained women like her across generations. Scholars note that in these reflections, Rania provides a rare window into the interior world of women in her time, a narrative seldom recorded, overshadowed by the stories of men and political upheavals that dominate the historical record. Yet, her presence in these fragments is vivid. She describes the quiet victories of daily survival, the tension between the necessity of labor and the fragility of her own body, and the subtle negotiations required to maintain her household while avoiding scrutiny from judgmental neighbors. With each passing season, new challenges emerged. Disease lingered in the village, occasionally claiming livestock or sparking fear of contagion among families, while political rumors and rumors of rage stirred anxiety on the edges of their rural existence. Rania, already hardened by a previous ordeal, found herself navigating these threats with a cautious determination, aware that her child's survival depended as much on prudence as on luck or divine protection. In one particularly harrowing episode, a severe storm flooded the riverbanks near her home, threatening to sweep away crops, livestock, and the fragile structures that sheltered her family. Rania, despite her lingering weakness, led efforts to reinforce barriers and salvage supplies, drawing on knowledge she had inherited from her mother and the village elders. Her leadership, quiet but effective, revealed a resilience that contrasted sharply with the vulnerability of her earlier days, demonstrating the duality of her existence, both at the mercy of circumstance and capable of shaping it through deliberate, careful action. As her child grew, so did Rania's awareness of the limited world they occupied, a landscape governed by tradition, hierarchy, and the unseen expectations placed upon women. Modern sociologists draw parallels between her experiences and contemporary accounts of women managing domestic, economic, and social responsibilities while recovering from childbirth, highlighting the continuity of these struggles across time. In her journal entries, she reflects on moments of fear for her child's future, pondering the possibility that this fragile new life might inherit the same uncertainties she had endured. The tension between hope and apprehension is palpable, a recurring theme that underscores the psychological weight of survival and isolation. Around this time, the village began to attract the attention of traveling merchants, bringing goods, news, and rumors from distant towns. Rania, cautious but curious, listened to these travelers, seeking information about health remedies, economic opportunities, and social trends that might aid her family. Each encounter was measured, for outsiders brought both promise and risk, the chance of knowledge and assistance, but also the potential for exploitation or danger. One merchant spoke of distant communities where women received specialized care during pregnancy and early motherhood, a concept both alien and tantalizing to Rania, highlighting the stark disparities between what existed elsewhere and the limitations of her own environment. She recorded these conversations meticulously, noting remedies, stories, and the advice of those who had traveled beyond the mountains, creating a mental and written archive that served as both a practical resource and a lifeline of hope. Yet, even as external possibilities expanded, internal pressures remained constant. Village hierarchies dictated behavior, and women who deviated from expected norms, even in small ways, faced criticism or ostracism. Rania, aware of this, maneuvered carefully, balancing her growing confidence with humility and prudence. She became adept at reading the subtle social cues around her, understanding that survival demanded both courage and discretion. Her interactions with other women became a source of shared knowledge and mutual support, a network of quiet solidarity that historians today recognize as critical in sustaining female resilience in historically patriarchal societies. Through whispered advice, shared remedies, and communal child-rearing practices, Rania and her peers created microcosms of agency within the broader constraints imposed by culture and circumstance. As years passed, her child's growth became a central focus, providing both joy and ongoing anxiety. Rania taught basic skills, shared cautionary tales, and instilled a sense of resilience she had acquired through hardship, aware that her lessons might be the difference between survival and misfortune. Yet, life's unpredictability remained constant. One autumn, a sudden outbreak of illness claimed several villages, and Rania confronted the stark reality that survival was never guaranteed, even for those who had endured past trials. She monitored her child obsessively, administering herbal remedies, enforcing strict hygiene, and observing behavioral changes, drawing on her hard-won knowledge and instincts honed through experience. The historian Dr. L. Hartley observes that such vigilance was both emotionally taxing and physically demanding, creating a cycle of stress that women like Rania navigated daily. In letters and oral histories, she details moments of despair, fleeting triumphs, and the quiet accumulation of knowledge that allowed her to continue guiding her child through danger. Her perspective is strikingly modern. She analyzes threats, anticipates potential crises, and weighs her options, demonstrating an intuitive grasp of risk management in a world devoid of formal medical or governmental support. Even as Rania grew older, the shadows of her earlier ordeal lingered. Nightmares, fleeting dizziness, and chronic pain reminded her of the precariousness of life, while her social standing remained tethered to her ability to conform outwardly to expected roles. Yet, through these trials, she cultivated a profound inner strength, balancing vulnerability with determination. Modern parallels are evident in studies of maternal resilience, highlighting that such psychological and emotional fortitude is both adaptive and critical to the survival of mothers and children in challenging circumstances. Rania's reflections also reveal her awareness of mortality, the fragility of human life, the randomness of disease, and the unseen hands of fate that shaped outcomes beyond her control. These contemplations, recorded in marginalia and letters, reveal a mind deeply engaged with the uncertainties of existence, a trait often overlooked in historical narratives dominated by political or military events. Over time, she became a quiet anchor in her village, offering counsel, aid, and the occasional reprimand to neighbors navigating crises of their own. Her experience gave her a perspective that commanded respect, though it was rarely formally acknowledged, and the lessons she imparted were carried forward by those who had observed her resilience firsthand. The juxtaposition of her personal growth with ongoing external threats underscores the precarious balance between vulnerability and strength, a theme that resonates across centuries. As Rania continued to navigate the complexities of her life, she remained vigilant, aware that the survival of her child, the stability of her household, and her own well-being were interconnected, fragile, and dependent on careful attention to both social and environmental factors. Through her story, we glimpse the persistence of ordinary courage, the quiet acts of endurance that shape lives in ways history often overlooks. By examining her experiences in detail, we understand that the shadows of history are not empty. They are filled with the silent struggles of individuals whose resilience allowed them to endure, leaving traces that speak to the human capacity for survival, hope, and adaptation. Even in the harshest conditions imaginable, the years that followed brought a mixture of stability and ongoing challenges. shaping Rania into a figure of quiet endurance whose life was etched with both triumph and sorrow. Her child grew stronger with each passing season, and Rania's attention shifted between nurturing, educating, and safeguarding this new life, while maintaining the household that had become both her responsibility and her anchor. The village, though still small and isolated, began to experience subtle changes, traders arriving more frequently, news from distant towns spreading slowly, and minor shifts in local governance that affected daily life. Rania observed these transformations with a cautious curiosity, aware that even minor alterations in the social or economic environment could have significant consequences for her family. She continued her meticulous record-keeping, writing letters and keeping journals that blended practical advice, observations about local events, and reflections on her own emotional state. These writings, though never widely disseminated in her lifetime, offer modern historians a rare window into the lived experience of a woman navigating the complexities of survival, motherhood, and social expectation. Scholars examining these documents note the balance Rania maintained between vigilance and hope, a duality necessary for enduring the unpredictable nature of life in a rural, pre-modern setting. As she walked through familiar pathways, observing her child playing under the watchful eye of neighbors, she could not help but reflect on the precariousness of existence, the invisible forces that shaped her life, and the unpredictable interventions of fate that had brought her through danger repeatedly. Her body, still bearing the marks of past illness and the exertions of childbirth, reminded her daily of mortality's close proximity, yet she drew strength from the resilience she had cultivated over the years, understanding that endurance was a form of quiet power. Rania also became increasingly aware of the broader currents of change in her region. Political tensions occasionally reached the village outskirts, and while direct conflict was rare, rumors of raids, taxation, and disputes reminded everyone that safety was provisional, contingent upon both chance and careful preparation. She responded with pragmatic foresight, reinforcing her home, stockpiling provisions, and instructing her child in basic survival skills that would ensure preparedness without cultivating fear. In these actions, Rania demonstrated a profound understanding of risk management, blending instinct, experience, and observation in a manner that resonates with modern practices in disaster preparedness and family resilience. Throughout this period, the social dynamics of the village subtly shifted as well. Women who had once been isolated in their struggles formed informal networks, sharing knowledge, resources, and support. Rania, having endured near-death and societal pressures, became a quiet mentor, offering advice on pregnancy, childcare, and domestic management, though always with discretion to avoid attracting undue attention. Her influence was palpable but understated. She shaped outcomes not through authority but through example, empathy, and the sharing of hard-won experience. One particularly memorable episode involved a young mother in the village whose child fell seriously ill. Rania, drawing upon her accumulated knowledge of herbal remedies, hygiene practices, and observational care, guided the mother through treatment, monitoring both child and parent, and intervening at critical moments. The child survived, and the mother later recounted Rania's guidance as indispensable, highlighting the often unseen ripple effect of one woman's perseverance. Despite her outward composure, Rania was not immune to fear or grief. Epidemics, crop failures, and the occasional untimely death of neighbors brought moments of deep reflection, where she questioned the fairness of life and the fragility of human plans. These experiences, however, did not diminish her determination. Rather, they reinforced a philosophy grounded in resilience, adaptability, and the relentless pursuit of life even in the face of repeated setbacks. Historians specializing in women's lives in rural pre-modern societies emphasize that Rania's experience, while unique in its details, reflects broader patterns of female endurance. The blending of practical skill, emotional intelligence, and social navigation required to survive and protect one's family in environments often hostile to individual welfare. As her child matured, Rania shifted her focus to education, morality, and practical skills, imparting lessons learned through personal hardship. She emphasized vigilance, empathy, and the importance of observing both human behavior and natural rhythms, recognizing that survival depended not only on physical strength, but also on awareness, adaptability, and emotional fortitude. Letters reveal her careful balancing act between caution and encouragement, preparing her child for a world where danger and opportunity coexisted, and where choices could carry unforeseen consequences. The village continued to evolve slowly, and Rania adapted alongside it, navigating changes in trade, governance, and social expectations. She maintained her routines, but allowed for flexibility when circumstances demanded it, demonstrating a remarkable capacity for dynamic problem-solving. Modern comparisons suggest that such adaptive strategies are consistent with what psychologists describe as resilience under chronic stress, a combination of planning, emotional regulation, social support, and experiential learning that allows individuals to thrive despite ongoing challenges. Rania's later years were marked by reflection as much as action. She recorded her thoughts on survival, motherhood, and the interconnectedness of human lives, contemplating how seemingly small decisions could influence outcomes across time and generations. Her writings convey a deep understanding of vulnerability and agency, illustrating that strength is often invisible, emerging not through spectacle but through sustained effort and careful attention to circumstance. She also reflected on the fleeting nature of recognition and memory. Though her life had been largely hidden from historical records, she understood that the lessons she imparted, the resilience she modeled, and the care she provided would ripple outward, influencing others in ways both immediate and subtle. This awareness did not diminish her own trials. It contextualized them, framing her endurance as part of a continuum of human experience that transcended individual fame or notoriety. Rania's health, though generally stable, remained susceptible to the lingering effects of past illness, childbirth, and physical exertion. She managed these vulnerabilities with a combination of traditional remedies, careful pacing of daily activity, and close attention to environmental cues. Her ability to integrate practical knowledge with lived experience exemplifies the often overlooked expertise of women in pre-modern societies, whose survival skills were essential yet rarely acknowledged in official historical narratives. Throughout her later years, she maintained correspondence with distant relatives, occasionally documenting events in the village, her observations on child-rearing, and reflections on societal changes. These writings, though fragmentary, allow modern historians to reconstruct a life of quiet influence, resilience, and practical wisdom, highlighting the ways in which women shaped the fabric of their communities despite systemic invisibility. One particularly poignant moment occurred when Rania witnessed her child successfully navigating a crisis, recalling the fears, pain, and determination of earlier years. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and a somber acknowledgement of the precariousness that had always accompanied life. In that instant, she recognized the cyclical nature of resilience. The knowledge, habits, and strategies she had cultivated would now be passed forward, ensuring continuity in the face of uncertainty. Scholars studying her writings and the surviving oral histories emphasized that such narratives challenge conventional historiography, offering insights into the daily realities, emotional landscapes, and adaptive strategies of women whose lives were often obscured. Rania's story, though lacking grand political or military events, embodies the profound complexity of human experience, where courage, endurance, and ingenuity are measured not in fame but in survival, care, and the subtle shaping of future generations. As the village continued to exist in its quiet rhythms, Rania's presence remained a stabilizing force, a testament to the uncelebrated heroism inherent in ordinary lives. Her legacy, transmitted through her child, neighbors, and the fragments of her writing, reminds us that history's shadows are not empty. They contain stories of remarkable persistence, compassion, and resourcefulness, waiting to be acknowledged. And in reflecting upon Rania's life, we come to understand that resilience is both intimate and communal, forged in the intersection of personal struggle and societal context, and that the traces of courage left in history's margins can illuminate truths about the human condition that transcend time. The shadows she inhabited were not merely absences of record, but spaces in which ordinary acts of strength were carried out in silence, influencing the course of lives in ways that may never be fully measured but are undeniably profound. Through her experiences, we witness the intersection of vulnerability and endurance, of despair and hope, and the intricate ways in which women like Rania navigated a world that offered them little recognition yet demanded much. Each decision she made, each moment of care, each measure of foresight contributed not only to her survival but to the survival of those around her, demonstrating that heroism often resides in patience, vigilance, and quiet wisdom. Rania's story challenges us to reconsider what it means to leave a mark on history, revealing that the true measure of impact may lie not in fame or legacy recorded in monumental texts, but in the subtle, persistent influence of lives lived with courage, thoughtfulness, and unwavering attention to the realities of human fragility and strength. Her narrative, reconstructed through letters, oral testimony, and careful historical analysis, reminds us that even lives hidden in the shadows hold profound lessons about endurance, love, and the uncelebrated power of quiet agency, offering a timeless mirror to the resilience inherent in the human spirit. Rania's life reminds us that history is never only the story of kings, generals, or grand events. It is also composed of quiet, courageous acts carried out in the shadows, often unnoticed, yet shaping the lives of those around us in profound ways. Her endurance, from the precarious days of pregnancy to the challenges of raising a child amid illness, social pressures, and environmental uncertainties, highlights the resilience of ordinary people navigating extraordinary circumstances. Every small decision she made, every precaution, every act of care, became a thread in a larger tapestry of survival, a testament to the strength of those whose stories were too often overlooked. As we reflect on Rania, we are invited to consider the countless lives like hers, lost to history yet echoing in the fabric of human experience. Her journey challenges us to see the courage and endurance, the heroism in quiet acts, and the profound significance of attention, empathy, and determination in the midst of adversity. It also encourages us to listen more closely to the voices that have been marginalized, to question whose stories have been recorded and whose have been silenced, and to acknowledge the lessons hidden in the shadows of time. In the story of Rania, we find both caution and inspiration, a reminder that even when history seems to forget, individual acts of strength, love, and perseverance endure. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, like the video, and tell us in the comments what type of stories you'd like to see. Share your thoughts on lives that history has overlooked, and consider how many untold stories remain waiting for discovery. By engaging with these narratives, we honor the resilience of people like Rania, ensuring that their struggles, triumphs, and legacies continue to resonate, teaching us not only about the past but also about the courage and endurance that exist in every human heart. The shadows of history may hold silence, but when we illuminate them with attention and care, they reveal lessons that are as vital and timeless as life itself.